Okay, so those are our four news stories for the month. I think we've done rather well to get through them in a fairly timely fashion as well. Well done. Pat myself on the head there. Congratulations. And now we move on to the Muppets of the month, and both of these Muppets are unfortunately coming from America. Now, I just want to
Actually,
pre-say.
I would chuck in a late entry for a Muppetry, which
Okay.
is this is controversial Muppetry, which is British.
Okay. Well, that's good. Okay, you saved me a little bit of embarrassment there. But I just wanted to just briefly just prefix the two that we're initially going to talk about with the
Yeah,
statement that we are not being overtly political here.
no.
It's not our fault that people who make decisions are making odd decisions or statements. So just wanted to put that out there. The first Muppet of the month, briefly, I think, I just want to talk about the fact that a Republican congressman has explained sea level rise as being rocks falling into the sea. Now, we're interested in sea level rise, are we not? Because we're archaeologists and we deal with climate change and the way in which humanity has interacted with the world for many thousands of years.
This is absolutely true. And yeah, we deal with climatic change and sea level change over millennia, and we recognise that it's a cyclical process with many complicated factors driving it.
Absolutely, and also in this instance, this current trend of climate change uh, uh, coincides with a post-Roman world, which undoubtedly is humanity impacted in an industrial sense. But this claim that rocks might be responsible for sea level rise, I find fascinating because it's a very dodgy position to be in. It's kind of like saying, uh, first of all, I didn't have an affair. Then
Mm.
saying to your wife, well, I might have had an affair, but the thing is, she was dressed like a clown. And then you go, well, what? It doesn't matter if she's dressed like a clown. You had no. The idea that he's now, or there's a movement towards saying yes, there is sea level rise, but then blaming it on something ridiculous, or saying that doesn't really matter because, I think is a very dodgy one. And if you it's an increasingly indefensible position. If the sea level is rising, it's not rocks, because if it's rocks, where do the rocks go, and how do the rocks come out again to make the sea level go down?
It, you can see where it's coming. There is a sort of element of science about it, because basically we're going right back to Archimedes in his bathtub, aren't we? But how many rocks have to fall into the sea to make the volume of the world's oceans rise by 20 meters?
Yeah. I mean, if you actually
You know,
thinking about the San Jose shipwreck we were talking about, I mean, how much did that displace the ocean by? I mean, was that
exactly.
measurable?
Yeah. Well, no. Now we're into chaos theory with the wings of the butterfly
Oh,
causing
we are.
the
Yeah,
storm.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the First World War, all those submarines going, but did no one worry about how the sea level might rise with all these submarines? It's
Oh, I know, but
it's
also, but the point is, the sea level would rise and fall because the submarines that went down also came up again.
Ah, I see. So where and that okay, and so every submarine that goes down, another one comes up. I
Exactly.
see. And then the
There's
delicate
that
the delicate balance was maintained. The Archimedes bathtub was maintained, and that's why we're all still alive today. But like it's
It's
a
why we're not
short.
doing this recording in a boat.
Exactly. Yes, it's a short, sharp, sweet little Muppet. I think I just want to just highlight it's a ridiculous standpoint,
Yeah.
and as I say, it's as ridiculous as trying to say that an affair doesn't matter because the person was dressed in a silly fashion. It's an old statement to make. The second Muppet of the month, though, this is a bit more serious, and this is the federal government in America. They have blocked archaeologists from speaking at a major science conference. Now, this particular
It's,
news.
it's not. I think we need to make clear it's not all archaeologists, and it's
No,
one
it's a
particular government
symposium.
department, the Bureau of Land Management, which
Yes,
yeah.
but unless uh, if lots of people like to rush to say the federal government on other issues, in this instance, if they're trying to make that distinction, again, I think they're being disingenuous. Uh, federal government has made this decision, and there's been a bit of an issue in terms of accessing the article from the UK because of GDPR. The Salt Lake Tribune website at the moment isn't accepting readers from Europe while they sort out their databases. But we've managed, through proxy servers and quasi-legal means, to get hold of
completely legal means.
Okay, completely legal means to get hold of a PDF version of that article. So we'll put a link to the original news article below. I will also link to a downloadable PDF for those of you in the UK or Europe who can't look at the website. And of course, as soon as that website's accessible, we'll make the PDF inaccessible. It won't be there forever. But what's your take on this in terms of, well, again, if we're talking about Muppets, who is the Muppet in this instance?
I think the Muppet is the current incumbent of the Oval Office and the really toxic.
So it is federal government, then it's not just BLM.
Yeah, because I think what has happened is that the Trump administration has brought with it, deliberately actually in many cases, virtually all of these cases we've looked at in fact, a view that evidence-based decision making is at best an inconvenience and at worst contra to their programme.
Well, and as the BLM statement said, the decision was made after reviewing conference topics and the agenda.
Yeah.
And they sent people who they felt would best represent the BLM. Now, arguably, and I just want to quickly play devil's advocate here, is that not their rights? I mean, does not every administration make decisions on how they're going to represent public policy?
Yes, absolutely right. That's what they do, but they're meant to do it objectively in terms of how best to serve the public. What appears to be happening here is that there's a defensive mentality creeping into the senior management of these organisations, which is basically saying, and there's evidence for why they would be worried about this, that basically if, for example, our archaeologists appear at X conference discussing the effect of climate change on our monuments and going forward, that could lead to central government cutting our funding because the Trump administration doesn't believe in human-led climate change.
No.
Arguably because of the number of people from the president downwards who have either expressed support for or are directly involved in the fossil fuel industry.
Well, that's definitely one angle. I mean, another element here that's worthwhile touching on, again, not so much being devil's advocate here, but just exploring the issue, is that a little bit like the certain aspects of the Conservative government here for the past going on 10 years, I guess, there's been at the moment in the US and the UK, there's a movement towards making especially development more straightforward and easier for developers, an economic argument being one of the main ones put forward, as opposed to having a robust cultural asset. Let's see, Stephen Block, legal director for Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, suggested that this is what we've come to expect from Republican administrations. They have created every incentive for themselves to rush ahead, offer lands for lease, approve development, and only reflect later that things should, or indeed could, have been done differently, and that in fact the impacts were greater than anticipated. It's the rush to... I think I've identified another theme here for the month. It's the rush to go down the predetermined answer that they want to have achieved. And so, for example, in this case of Stonehenge, there's definitely some pressure there as well. So it's there is a climate change element here that does obviously tie in with our rock and sea level rise story as well. But I think, I suppose I'm most concerned about this article because it's also ironically, it's micromanagement of thought, debate, discussion, and the access to information, which certainly from the outside seems to go against so many so many ostensible values of the US, and especially also actually, funnily enough, for the Republican Party. Micromanagement is a big government problem, isn't it? Then they want a small government. Then there's that element of micromanagement, but also as well there's the issue here of, frankly, freedom of speech.
Yes.
And shutting down the ability of archaeologists to talk to each
and,
other.
and for me, that is the real core of this. It doesn't matter what, in a sense, that particular symposium was about. The fact that people were prevented from expressing genuinely held evidence-based views at an academic conference is really sinister and dangerous.
Yeah.
To me, because if and we all know we're in a far from perfect system, and particularly when it comes to issues about funding and organisational reputation and all these other things that play into people's career decisions and what they can and can't say these days. I know from spending a large part of my life nowadays trying to cover stories that people would rather weren't covered. I know what pressures people are under not to talk. Either from the outside, from their employers, or self-censoring. But that is actually really dangerous, because in the end, you risk having a sector that is so devalued it becomes worthless, or certain parts of the sector that are so devalued they become worthless.
Yeah, which some would say is part of the long-term strategy.
Absolutely, and if that, and if some people do believe that, and personally I do believe that on certain people, particularly on the alt-right at the moment, there is a campaign, a deliberate campaign to undermine the structures that enabled government to operate from much of the Enlightenment period, post-Enlightenment period, right up until now. We're now, it's called many things. Populism is the most common word at the moment. It's the idea that
it's the most popular one.
If the majority think that it's a good idea to then therefore that must be the right thing to do. And it's the line of argument that is put in Ibsen's play An Enemy of the People, which Jaws the movie is based on. It's just because somebody's saying something's unpopular, the spa's polluted, there's a blooming great shark in the sea, doesn't mean, if people don't want to believe it for various reasons, it doesn't mean it's not right.
No, and I suppose just this is a less light-hearted element of this story, but I think it's true. Is that the impact of this as well is not necessarily going to be achieved from it's going to be a mandate put down from someone in an office in Washington. The real world impact in terms of discouraging people to do this sort of stuff will be actually in individual people's wallets. So in this instance, Bill Dole, I think it's Dole or Doel, of non-profit Archaeology Southwest, said that he was really shocked. People had made hotel reservations and plane reservations, and they were ready to go. It was the Thursday, the week before the conference, that they pulled out. This is a huge lost opportunity. And I know I couldn't afford to keep doing that. I couldn't afford to pay for something and not go.
And the timing of that as well suggests to me, and I've got no evidence for this apart from it will be something I want to look into if I was covering this story in more detail than I've had the chance to. But the timing of that is suggestive of one of two things. One is that someone in the senior management of that organisation suddenly realised what was happening and thought politically this would not be good for us, or that person in the senior management who was in a position to take that decision took a phone call from somebody or got an email from somebody that said basically it would not be good for your organisation if your people went.
No. Yeah. It's I mean, this segment, Muppets of the Month, is meant to be amusing. Do you have an amusing Muppet for our third one?
Not really.
Oh, no.
It's sort of, I'm quite happy to put my head above the parapet on this one, but
Okay.
it's one that broke over the weekend, and it's Jeremy Corbyn.
Oh, okay.
Jeremy Corbyn has given an interview to a Greek newspaper called Tanea, where he said that, or according to the newspaper anyway, translated from the Greek, in an exclusive interview given to Naya, Jeremy Corbyn agrees that if elected, he will begin the return of the Parthenon sculptures to our country. The Parthenon sculptures belong to Greece, he says, without turning. Now, this isn't the place to have an argument about the Parthenon sculptures. It is incredibly complex, legally, ethically, in terms of museum practice, in terms of the legal status of museum collections, and so on. So to dismiss it, as appears to have been the case in one line, albeit it's a long-standing opinion that Corbyn's expressed before, I think it's naive and unhelpful.
Okay. So you think he's being a Muppet in so much as he's making, well, as arguably he has done before, making promises that he can't
He's got
keep.
form for this on the day after the EU referendum. He was on television saying that he thought Article 50 to take Britain out of the European Union should be triggered straight away. Now, given the mess we're in 2 years on, when it was, and you can imagine the kind of disaster that would have been facing us had that happened. It's sort of it's the old shooting from the lip thing.
No.
And to be fair, a Labour spokesperson appears to row back from this slightly, and certainly row back from associating the party with it, because and this is in the context, of course, of the British Museum Act of 1963, which requires the British Museum trustees to maintain the collection. The Labour spokesperson said Jeremy was stating his long-standing personal view that the Parthenon statues were made in and belonged to Greece.
Yeah.
So they're not saying he's making party policy on the hoof, although people will quote it as that. It's the old thing about engage brain before opening mouth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was much less amusing than I thought it might be as a segment. But at the very least, we showed political balance.
we were equal opportunities.
The right,
Muppeteers,
the left, the far right, and arguably the far left.
The left and
yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, of course, according to horseshoe theory, of course, they meet at many.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Okay. Well, moving on.